Remember in chapter 7, we did calculate the inflation rate. It was simply the percentage change in your price level. So if you have a price index for 2 consecutive years, you can simply take the difference and divide it by the previous year times 100 will give you your inflation rate. And we had different types of price indices that we can use to calculate the inflation rate, like your CPI, IPPI, or the GDP deflator. Now we want to see what is the significance of the rising price level or different types of inflation. Remember, inflation is increase in the price level and deflation is decrease in the price level, when from one year to the next the price level is actually lower than before. And in this case, your inflation rate will actually come out to be negative. So negative inflation rates tells you that the economy is experiencing deflation. Over time, you can see the CPI is continuously rising. So just the rising of the price level does not really tell us much about the effect of this rising price level on our economy in terms of is it bad or good. Whereas the inflation rate, you can see, is changing very drastically. There are certain time periods in which your inflation rate is very high, and then there's other time periods in which your inflation rate is very low and might even become negative. So you can see in 2009 our economy actually experienced deflation. A lot of people misinterpret this information and think any type of rising price level will necessarily hurt the economy. In order to gauge better how changes in the price level or inflation rate are affecting us, we need to see changes in income also, because remember, prices are not the only variable changing in our economy over time. Income of workers and wages are also changing at the same time. So that's why economists like to look at real variables like real wages or real income. Now, real wage is simply nominal wage rate divided by the price level. Note, if both these are rising at the same level, real wage is actually not changing. However, if nominal wages increase by more than the price level, in real terms, workers are actually earning more than before, so they're actually better off. Conversely, if nominal wages are increasing but prices are rising by more than that, in this case your real wages are actually going down. And this is the scenario that we don't want, because in this case, workers are actually losing purchasing power over time and they're actually becoming worse off. That's another reason why a lot of labor contracts will tie the increase in the nominal wage rate with the inflation rate. So if inflation is at least 2%, your nominal wages will also rise by at least 2%. With strong labor unions, we often see this happening. Similarly, we can also see the effect of the changes in price level on households by looking at real income rather than just nominal income. Real income would be simply your nominal income divided by the price level. And again, it will give you an indicator of how real income changes over time. Economists will typically become more wary if real income starts to decline. Price level alone really doesn't matter, because if the rising price level comes with increases in real income, it doesn't raise red flags for us. However, if your rising price level is accompanied with declining real wages and declining real incomes, that is when policymakers will step in and try to intervene in this economy to provide some type of relief to households and workers. Now let's look at some of the economic costs of inflation. The first one is your shoe leather costs, and these are the increased costs of transactions. These primarily arise because when you have high inflation, your cash is losing its purchasing power and people will quickly try to spend it or convert it into some other asset that is better at retaining value over time. The transaction cost is the time that people are wasting over here in order to convert their cash into other assets. And we have seen this experience in many economies where during hyperinflationary periods, their banking sector actually starts to grow. It's an indicator of how your resources are being diverted from your real economy towards expansion of sectors which are not necessarily contributing to higher real production. The second is your menu cost of inflation, and this is the cost of changing listed prices. And this is quite easy to understand. Imagine you have a grocery store with listed prices. With periods of high inflation, and especially during hyperinflation, you will have to devote more resources to changing those listed prices every day or quite often during the week. And again, these resources are being taken away from real production into just changing your listed prices, and therefore there are an additional cost to your economy, reducing the overall level of efficiency. The third cost of inflation is your unit of account costs. And remember, money or your dollar is your standard unit of account to ascertain the value of all production in your economy. Remember our GDP example from chapter 7. We had apples and oranges, and in order to ascertain the value of these apples and oranges, we needed dollar prices. Without these dollar prices, I could not ascertain the true value of total production of apples or oranges. Now, if dollar itself is not reliable because of very high inflation in this economy, I can no longer get a reliable measure of value for this production based on dollars. And therefore, economy will try to switch away from this currency to some alternative currency that is more stable and is better at ascertaining the value of production in this economy. In order to understand this, let's look at the example of hyperinflation experienced by Zimbabwe. It is one of the most terrible instances of hyperinflation in history. They ended up issuing $100 trillion bill in 2009. With the $100 trillion bill issued, you can easily become a trillionaire in Zimbabwe. But what does it buy you? Not even a loaf of bread or even a whole bar of chocolate. So there must be plenty of trillionaires in Zimbabwe. But can they buy houses, cars, or other major goods and services? Absolutely not. So that's what hyperinflation does to your economy. You can now no longer use the domestic currency as an accurate unit of account that will give you the true value of goods and services being produced or exchanged in this economy. And we started seeing in Zimbabwe that people started switching to alternative currencies like the US dollar or the euro for most of their transactions, because prices listed in these alternative currencies were more reliable for giving us information about the value associated with these goods and services. Inflation also has a huge impact in our financial markets. In order to understand that, we'll have to make a distinction between nominal interest rate and real interest rate. Nominal interest rate is simply your cost of borrowing in dollar terms. So for example, I'm borrowing $100 from you and you charge me $10 for lending me this amount, and I'm liable to pay you back this money after 1 year. The interest rate in this contract is my rental cost of funds as a percentage of my principal amount times 100, which is simply 10%. So this is our nominal interest rate for this contract. Real interest rate is your nominal interest rate minus the inflation rate. So whenever we make contracts, even if they are in nominal terms, we have some expectation of inflation attached to them. So in this case, if I am expecting to pay you back 10%, I'm expecting inflation to be at least 2% over this 1 year. So the real interest rate or real cost of borrowing for me is only 8%. And you know that this $100 will actually lose value over time. So after 1 year, you will actually lose 2% because of inflation. So your real payoff from lending is only 8%. So the real interest rate applies to both the borrower and lender, and it is based upon some expectation of inflation. Now, if inflation does not change, it remains at 2%, everything is hunky-dory. Nobody is made better off or made worse off. The problem arises when we have unexpected inflation. So what happens if inflation is higher than what we were expecting it to be? So let's assume we are working with the same contract. We wrote a contract for 10%. I am the borrower, you are the lender, and we are both agreed that I will pay you back $10 or 10% on the $100 I borrowed from you. And we were both expecting inflation to be 2%. However, after 1 year, we realized that the inflation is actually higher than what we were expecting it to be. So we can assume it to be 3%. How will it affect me, the borrower, and how does it affect you? So let's look at the effect on our real interest rate because of this higher inflation. Our nominal is the same and my actual inflation is now 3%. This causes my real interest rate to actually go down. It's below 8%. As a borrower, this is actually good for me because in real terms, I'm paying you less than before. And as a lender, it's making you worse off because in real terms, you're not getting 8% on your $100. You're actually only getting 7%. So whenever inflation is higher than expected, it makes your borrowers better off because it reduces the real cost of borrowing, and it makes your lender worse off because it is reducing the real payoff to lending. What will happen if inflation is lower than expected? So our expectation was 2%. Our nominal contract was at 10%, but now let's assume inflation is actually only 1% after 1 year. This actually increases my real interest rate. So the real cost of borrowing has actually gone up, and as a borrower, it has made me worse off. And as a lender, I'm getting a higher real return compared to 8%. So as a lender, you're actually better off. When we have a lot of volatility in inflation and inflation is not stable, we will see that borrowers and lenders will be hesitant in participating in financial markets because both parties would not know what the real interest rate is. The borrowers would be apprehensive about inflation going down and the lenders would be apprehensive about the inflation going up. As both parties are not sure about the real interest rate, overall we'll see less money transferring from savers to borrowers in the economy. This is called a credit crunch, causing overall investment in this economy to go down, and therefore overall production, your big Y GDP, will not be as high as we were expecting it to be. Now we saw the costs of inflation, and we know high inflation, especially if it's unexpected, has many costs associated with it. What do central banks do in order to reduce it? Central banks can do many possible things, and we'll discuss them in detail in chapter 12 onwards. But for now, if they try to reduce the inflation rate, this is called disinflation. So this is not the price level going down, this is the inflation rate going down. So for example, inflation rate is 11% and we want to reduce it to a single digit number like 6%. The cost of reducing this inflation rate is typically in terms of high unemployment. So we have seen that whenever central banks have tried to reduce inflation rate or disinflate the economy, they have had to bear the cost of high unemployment. This is especially experienced in the short term. And this economic data over here for Canada shows us this trend that in the early 80s, we had very high inflation rate, almost as high as 12%. But as our central bank tried to disinflate the economy, we had to bear the cost of very high unemployment rate going as high as almost 14% over here. In the long run, we do not see this negative relationship. However, in the short run, negative relationship is quite stark and obvious. We had a similar experience in 91 when inflation was again relatively quite high. And again, as the central bank tried to disinflate the economy, you can see our unemployment rate is now going up. I'm looking at the purple dots over here. So in the short run, we had to experience higher unemployment in order to disinflate the economy. Summarizing over here, whenever we try to disinflate the economy, we will end up creating higher unemployment. This is typically because in order to reduce your inflation rate, we are trying to dampen economic activity. And with dampening of economic activity, unemployment will typically tend to go up, at least in the short run. Remember, this cost of disinflating the economy is only experienced in the short run. In the long run, there is no correlationship between the two. So that's it for today. We discussed unemployment and inflation in a lot of detail. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I will see you guys next time.